Arganissima, New York. Your exotic skin, hair, and beauty source, and your one-stop shop for all your natural and organic skin and hair care, featuring authentic organic Moroccan oil and prickly pear seed oil and much more. Bringing you only the best, straight from the source and proudly produced in the USA. So what are you waiting for? Shop today at www.arganissima.com. Arganissima, New York. Your beauty is our...
Folks, welcome back to the iHealth channel, the Fit and Fab channel specifically today, and iHealth Radio with a new day, new show, new topic, new guest. Actually, I was supposed to have this show a couple of days before, but there was I guess, technical difficulties, and we made it work. And so we're here today, and that's the bottom line. And we want to make sure that we send this message out. Again, today is Fit, and Fab, and so we're talking about fitness and wellness specifically in a different angle. Something that I've actually covered on a different episode about almost a year and a half ago, and it was about holistic angles, and specifically in the world of Ayurveda. And today I have a specialist also who handles that, who has a unique approach, a unique style, a unique formula that combines this. Her background is personal training and in the fitness world, but she found a new way of combining that with the holistic approach of Ayurveda. And she has a very well formulated piece of work that helps people kind of get into their best shape, form, wellness, mental, and all that stuff. And again, I'm not going to talk any further about it. I want her to tell us about it. So Andrea Klassen, did I say it right?
Klassen, so yes. Yeah.
Okay, good. I was like, okay, I'm going to do this. I'm going to do this right. All right. So Andrea, first of all, thank you for being on the show and welcome. And I know you do podcasts, you're a personal trainer, you do all kind of stuff. So this is not new to you. And you do help a lot of folks out there. And the concept of Ayurveda is unique on its own, and we're going to talk about that and define it. And even though I've covered it before, I think there's always room to discuss more about it. And believe it or not, about a year ago, I didn't even know what it was. So
I think you're not alone.
Exactly. And so more people hear about it, more understand it. I mean, I found out about Reiki, I found out about certain things that were out there, but just were not part of in my radar, right? So, and similarly, and I'm in the fitness world for like my whole life, pretty much. Still didn't hear about them. I knew yoga. Yoga is good. Everybody knows yoga, but this is like a cousin of yoga, I guess, and the family of the same. But the idea is, first things first, I want to just go with your background and how you got into your personal training and all that, and then what prompted you to really get into the Ayurvedic, world, and what is that in the first place? So let's go with that.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for having me on the show. I'm super excited to be here and share more about my story. So I have been in the personal training space now for 15 years, and I really started doing workouts for friends. Like I started lifting weights at the age of 16. So way back in the day, we had a women's or girls only weight room in high school. And my coach was like, hey, do you want to come in the mornings and lift weights? So I'm like, sure. So I made one of my teammates. And she was like, okay, if I'm doing this, like you have to write up workouts for us, because I'm not just going to come in there and do whatever. So that's kind of my first introduction to it. And then in college, I studied psychology and sports and exercise science. So the perfect blend for personal training. And then right out of college, I, started training. So I was working from, as most trainers have the trainer schedule, 5 a.m. until 10 p.m. And then I also coached a youth basketball team. So I also had that on the weekends. So I'm working a ton. And then all of a sudden, probably after doing this for about 5 years, every Friday, like clockwork, I would end up throwing up at this soccer academy where I did some training. And it was just, my body was just stressed out and just overwhelmed. And so that was kind of my first, like, what's going on? I'm young, I'm healthy. And then my boss finally called me in at that job, and he was like, you have to make a decision. At the time I just started my business, but it had grown quite a bit. And so he's like, it's either your business or you're staying here with me. So I chose my business. And then with that, I kind of started to discover new modalities. And that's when I first got into yoga. I went on a yoga retreat in Costa Rica, got introduced to Ayurveda. And then that's where I was like, well, I need to know more about Ayurveda. Like this seems like the perfect wellness system to go with my personal training. And so, I studied that, and I've been studying that for the last 7 years. And that has been really the game changer I have found with my clients, like actually getting better results. One-on-one personal training and Ayurveda has been getting better results than just one-on-one Ayurveda. I have found that training piece really is an important piece rather than me just sitting and talking with a client, because I think people are actually like, they're doing a workout and I'm just saying, hey, can we introduce this habit? Can we introduce this? And I think a lot of the times they're already ready to make changes. And so I'm finding it's easier for them to introduce Ayurvedic concepts than just a one-on-one sit down Ayurvedic client.
Wow. Well, there's a lot of there.
I know.
We got to break it down.
That was my clip notes.
I know that was good. It was like a nice summary. But now let's dive in. And the first things first. I mean, you started working out early on, and you took. I mean, weightlifting is big, and I have to say, for a girl, it's not a common thing, and a lot of people may think that it's not a woman thing, but it is. There's plenty of bodybuilding girls and women out there that are really into it. And you did at a younger age, which is the best time to really build all that, mass and shape and look and all that, and maybe compete and all that. So that was good. But then you took that into a full-time job and you became a personal trainer. And you're right. In the personal training world, you have to have clients, and you start from as early as where the gym opens at 5 and whatever they end up. Sometimes some gyms are even 24 hours,
Yeah.
And I know people don't realize in the fitness world, you're physically working. I mean, obviously in all the work we do physical, activities, but you are training people, but you're also showing them doing. And if you do an hour average a day is one thing, but if you do like 4 or 5 hours where you actually are lifting, doing, showing, it takes a toll on your body. And anyone that actually
and teaching group fitness, because I taught classes too. So you throw that in the mix and you've got
exactly.
a lot of workouts.
You have your cardio, you have your body. Your body is really your knees, everything. I mean, yeah, when you're young, it's okay. You don't feel it as much. And it gets a little to a point where, things are not working out. And so eventually something happened. And you said you started literally just, clockworks every Friday. You have this vomiting, event. First of all, did you find out what it was, specifically medically speaking?
No, I mean, I'm pretty sure it was a stress, because after I quit, I'm thankful for that owner, because he ran this business and he had this big soccer academy. And so he kind of introduced it and was like, hey, this is what I think is going on. And he wanted he was going to buy out my business so I could be with him full time. And I said, you know what, I'm going to bet on myself. I'm going to do this thing. And I've had my business now for 10 years. So it was a good bet. But, from him even just saying, life as an entrepreneur, it can be stressful, like you're go, go, go. So as soon as I quit, kind of spreading myself so thin, I stopped. Like all of that stopped. I didn't throw up anymore. And my friends would make fun of me because they'd come to my apartment and they're like, you wrote clipping your fingernails on your to-do list. I'm like, yeah, that's how busy I was. Like, I didn't have time to just do little things like that. And so, once all of that kind of faded away, I was like, oh, I have space. I have time to slow down and to breathe and to rest, and realizing how important that is, no matter, even as you're an entrepreneur, because at the time I wasn't married. And so I'm supporting myself. So you have that hustle mentality because you need to support yourself. But then you also have to have that, time where, okay, I'm not going to work weekends. I'm not taking any training clients on the weekends. And then I started kind of like right now, I only see clients 3 days a week. So I've really buttoned up my schedule now to the point where I'm like, okay, I might be pushing hard for, 3 days a week, but I know I have plenty of time to rest and recharge and do back end stuff like my podcast and my admin, checking in on clients those other days.
Well, thank you. I mean, that's big. And I think, I didn't talk about this yet, but the fact that you were not only working for somebody, but also started your own, I know exactly how that feels. I'm doing it right now. I mean, I'm working full time and I have this and I'm doing other things. And I've done it pretty much for the last 25 years. I've been always doing double things and stuff. And I know I do have a healthy formula where I do take my time off. I just do my stuff, my weekends, my time. So I have it broken down into a science right now. So it's good, but you're right. There's a point when you're younger and you just hustle, to your point, just do it. And because you want to reach those targets and dream goals that you've set, and whatever they may be. In your case, you wanted your business to grow and do this, and sometimes it can go into conflict. And again, because yours is all physical, that's the part. I mean, your physical body has limitations no matter how. We're not meant to operate 24/7 physically. You have to rest the body. You have to give you enough nutrition. You have to take a pause and breathe and take a break. more than just once. I mean, and that's been proven. I mean, and even in just the business world as normal, even people that sit in the desk, they have to get up and do the thing, stretch, and then just take off, a little bit of time off from work, because you have to, your mental state also has an impact. So it's a combination of all. And you're right, stress can't do that. I mean, you get anxiety, and maybe that's how the body reacts. And so for people listening and watching, you might find yourself in the same predicament, because I think a lot of us, at any given time, we might get into that mode where like life gets in the way and we are trying to make it, but then it's on the depends of your own health and physical and mental, and that takes a toll. And sometimes it could be too late. So we want to make sure that don't wait until it's too late.
Oh yeah. Yeah. And I have plenty of clients who, were in their 50s and 60s and, would kind of like lecture me, like nicely, hey, what are we doing here, Andrea? I think you might be doing too much. And in the Ayurvedically speaking, I am like a pitta dosha. And so that is kind of like your go, very goal oriented. And that is just my inner drive. And that is my balance, is a little bit of push. And a lot of the clients that were telling me this were also pitta women, but who had crashed and burned, who both of the ones who I'm thinking of in particular, had breast cancer. And they're like, we pushed too hard when we were younger. And this is what happened, like the body, you don't pay attention. Like you're just stuff starts to happen, inflammation and all of those things. And so that was kind of also eye-opening, in my late 20s, I'm like, oh, that's so far away. But then really, like, I'm now in my late 30s and I'm like, oh yeah, this matters, our health matters. And it's right around the corner, is like, I talk a lot about, working out with your cycle as well, and menopause. And I'm like, well, menopause, even in your late 30s, people have to start thinking about that, because what you're doing now is going to affect menopause. And so now really just taking that kind of holistic lens and really saying, okay, like, what are we doing now to prepare for the future? That's kind of how I take that bird's eye view.
Well, thank you. I mean, you've actually covered almost a different angles in terms of age groups and what people should expect. Now, obviously, you're referring to women specifically. And I think, yes, while men may not experience menopause specifically, but I think it happens for all. I mean, both sides of the spectrum, they might have their own ways of really feeling that stress and getting really potentially in a bad situation. So, and you're right. So the idea is, when we are younger, the energy is there, the metabolism is kicking, and we're invincible. Bottom line, I'm no longer at that age, but I remember it was only the other day, and where I thought that I can conquer the world and everything I did, and fitness and all that, and I can do it all. But then it's funny, because your body does tell you, like, hey, you can't think about it, but I'm not going to do it. Whatever you're thinking, your mind may think that you can jump, but my body's not going to go with it. And it happens that way. Obviously, I mean, we have to keep, up with whatever you do. I mean, if you love fitness and wellness, stay in it. I'm never going to say to anyone, I think as long as I live, I'm going to be doing something physical and activities. That's just how it is. So never stop, no matter what. But do it where balance is key. And you said a very key word. Now you're doing 3 days a week, so you balance it out. So you have your days off, you do your stuff, and you take a little bit of a breather in between. And by the way, you will give more that way, because if you're completely depleted, I mean, how much good can you do to others? And if people are seeing you like, oh my God, okay, just pick up in the weight, and your energy is going to demotivate them, and they're not going to have any energy themselves, because it's all about that energy exchange. And so that's a big deal. Oh
yeah. I talk about that all the time with one of my other trainer friends when I was kind of first starting my business. And I was like, man, what do you do to kind of recharge? Because you kind of, when you work the split hours, and again, I don't do that anymore, because I've consolidated that as well. So my hours are primarily morning, and I'm done by 1. But when I had those split days, and if you're a trainer or even anyone who works kind of that split shift, you kind of never feel off. Even though you have that break in the middle of the day, you kind of still are like, okay, I got to get back on in the evening. And as a trainer, most people don't like to work out. Like, that's just not something people like to do. And so I have to kind of be that energy and provide that for people, so they're excited to be here and, excited to get the new workout, when they might be like, oh man, it's 6 o'clock, I'm done working, this is the last place I want to be, so I have to bring that. And so I found that for myself, having now the set, like pretty much 8 a.m. until like 2 are kind of my set training hours, that has helped too for my own sustainability. Because otherwise it's hard for me to get going to pause, get going, pause, because that wears you down too.
Well, yeah, I mean, you don't want to have the yo-yos up and downs and stuff. You want to like have a steady, you start your day, it's pumping and all that. And you're right. Sometimes you can, in a lot of gyms, for example, personal trainers or even instructors, they may have sessions in the mornings. They come back in the afternoon. They do it. They have a little breather. They sleep. They write, whatever they have to do in between. So they re-energize and go back. And remember, in this world of fitness and wellness and personal training in general, you are, if your customers, your clients cannot feel that you are off.
Yeah.
I mean, otherwise there's plenty of choices. The reason they choose you is you are there for them. You motivate, you pump them. But if you're always like constantly off, I mean, they're not going to see that, and they're just going to like, this is not for me. I'm going to move somewhere else. So that's a big deal. And you're right. The motivation comes from you. I mean, yes, they have to be inspired themselves, but the motivation has to come. And if that motivation is lacking, or you're just very weak for them, now listen, we are human. Sometimes we're off no matter what. You can try, you can get energy, drinks, but you're not there. But you just have to keep them motivated. That's the key. But
well, I think the energy part too, with the, it ebbs and flows, especially like with the cycling female. I'm trying to teach people too that rest, I'm like, there are going to be times where you are low energy just because your hormones are low energy right now. And that's okay. But, like your client might even ask, like they might pick up on that if you have a good enough relationship with them. But knowing that like most of the days you are there for them, like clients could again feel that. And that's one of the things I'm passionate about too, is, having that right coach. Cause I think sometimes we've all hired, like, I know I have in business wise, I've hired the wrong coach and the energy was off. And that's the same thing with like the personal training or any like one-on-one relationship is, finding that energy match for you.
Well, again, it's part of what people see. I mean, you go to any gym, fitness, wellness center right now, you usually experience it. You get a couple of sessions just to feel it. And that's exactly what people make a decision. Did they join or they not join there? I mean, and that's what makes a difference between maybe a different school to another, or a different gym center or gym, fitness, wellness, whatever. Because you go in one place, like the mood is really off, and you go, oh my God, I love these people. They're like happening. And that's really what drives you. Even classes within the same gym. I mean, you have different instructors with different pieces, and everybody has a different, energy level. Some classes are kind of mild, and some classes like, you hear that from the outside, like, oh, go. I mean, people are going crazy and you just want to be part of that, right? So contagious. But you're right. We drive that in terms of when you lead anybody, right? By the way, this is also good for business purposes, not even in the wellness and fitness. Your energy projects, and whether you're doing it just a public speaking or a speech or a presentation, if you're like, okay, so today we're going to, I mean, everybody's gonna like snooze on you, right? So, but it's all about that, like keep them engaging. But that's exactly what happens. And the wellness and fitness, it's live, it's physical, it's mental, it's all happening at the same time. So Andrea, let's talk now about your experience. You went to yoga. And there was a reason, because yoga actually, I guess it's a calming, soothing, it gives you a whole different, Zen, ability. But then that was the transition, and that's how you discovered the Ayurveda, world. So you said Costa Rica, right?
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
I want to go there. I mean, I've heard only the best. I know it's one of the best, locations. I think there's more Americans now there than I can imagine.
Oh yeah.
It's really a big place, and everybody that goes there, they fall in love with the nature and all that. And I think if there's a place, probably it is on to-do list and the bucket list, it's definitely on there.
It's gorgeous. Yes. Yeah. I went to a yoga retreat there, and that was where, and this is before I became a yoga teacher. And, the instructor there was like, oh, Andrea, you're a pitta. And I was like, I don't know what this means, this pitta. And so I was kind of like, what is this? And then she was like, it's based in Ayurveda. And my friend there, she was like, you're vata. And so I got to learn a little bit about, your pitta, your vata, and then the other one is the kapha. And so I signed up immediately when I got back. I was like, well, I'm going to go to a yoga teacher training and learn more about Ayurveda, which is kind of funny because when you actually go to a yoga teacher training, the Ayurveda day is literally 3 hours. And so, you go through your first, and now I've went through 500 hours of yoga teacher training, but my first 200 hour, 3 hours is what we spent. And so that's where after that, I'm like, well, I want to know more about Ayurveda. Like I like the yoga, and I like that I can use it now with clients. So on days where clients were low energy, and I still do this to this day, is we do yoga days, and they love that too, that flexibility of like, you know what, I'm really exhausted. Can we just do yoga today? And then I'm like, sure. So I have that in my kind of tool bag. And then Ayurveda, I was like, oh, I really want to go deeper. And so I studied with Katie Silcox and with Kate Stillman. And so I went through a few of their programs. And one was about the feminine form. And then the first year with Kate Stillman was kind of just getting the bare, like just your Vata, Pitta, Kapha. What does that mean? How does this actually implement in the Western world? And so I found a good mixture of both of those philosophies, because if I didn't have that bare bones of like what it is going into that feminine form, where it's a little bit more, in your head, and you have to really ground these practices down, which I like to do now, but Western, like our minds don't work that way. We like to know, what are we? Are we a Vata? Are we a Pitta? Or are we a Kapha? And so making sure that we have those, those quizzes, I think are important, just so we can kind of get the door open for people to understand a little bit more about what Ayurveda is.
Sandra, can you, on those three, the Pitta, and can you just, what they are, for just audiences? Because I mean, I have no idea what they are. I mean, it sounds like they're different ranks, different ranks or levels.
So the Vata, Pitta, and Kapha are all mind body types. And so they're associated with, with our own selves, but also with the seasons and also with the time of day. So they are kind of the thing that makes Ayurveda go. And so once you kind of learn a little bit about those three, you can kind of see them in everyday life. So for example, the Vata dosha is, in humans, this is going to look like out of balance. If you're on your phone and you're talking to your friend and you're like, okay, I'm trying to go meet you, but I can't find my phone. Where did I put my phone? That scattered, anxious energy. You're like, no, I'm on my phone. That's why I can't find it. So that's an out of balance Vata, which I think we've all felt, because it's related to that wind element. So it can be a little bit more, like on windy days, I've had many people come back and they're just blowing. They're like, what was that idea? What was I going to do? Oh, I forgot to write that down, and now it's gone. And then in balance, so that Vata dosha, very much like the guy that I worked for at that soccer academy, that he was Vata. His ideas just poured out of him. Like he was this huge, like CEO of just, his whole office was filled with just writing and ideas, and just constantly just so creative. But what can happen, and the flip side of that, is he needed me, the Pitta, to drive it forwards. So I was the one who could see these ideas and actually put them and implement them. So the Pittas come in as kind of that driver and the motivator. But out of balance, a Pitta is going to look like burnt out, overwhelmed. The person throwing up on Fridays, like that's all that Pitta being out of balance. And then that third dosha is that Kapha. And so Kapha's imbalance are, I always call them like the Mama Earths, or Papa Earths, I guess, but they're the people that you just want to give them a hug. Like they're so grounded in their energy. They're so warm. They're the people who just love to give. And then out of balance, it's going to look like they've given too much and not taken care of themselves. They get stuck on the couch, Netflix and chill. Like that's kind of just low motivation. That's what Kapha looks like out of balance. And so we have all three of those in us in different amounts. And so just because, like, for example, I'm a Pitta does not mean that my Vata won't go out of balance, because it does. Like that's probably the dosha of mine that goes out the most. I don't have a ton of Kapha in me. And so for me, that's a pretty easy dosha to balance. I don't have to worry a ton about that dosha per se, because again, that's just the least amount of quality in me. And I also find I don't do as well with Kapha clients just because of that. Like I can't relate as well, just because it's not, my innate nature is not Netflix and chill. It's the more up and go. So that's kind of how I use it too with clients, is motivational. Like, okay, my Pitta people, we need to chill out. We need to practice self-care so we don't burn out, so we're not overwhelmed. And then the Vata people, they usually have to do some sort of meditation, some grounded, especially in the morning. If they don't start their day with a little grounding, they tend to be a little bit scattered. And by the end of the day, they're like, what did I get done today? It's kind of like a tornado energy. And the Kapha, the best thing to start their day is movement. Kaphas need to get up and get going. So that's also the toughest one I found for personal training, is typically the Kaphas like to work out later, but really it's good for them to get going and get moving.
I love the description you have, because it almost looks like an equalizer.
Yeah.
Depending on which frequency, you just have to tune up and tune down to get them adjusted to the right balance so they can actually perform at that prime. I love that. I mean, that's pretty cool stuff. I mean, yeah, it's you're right. There's different personalities, different levels, energies. Everybody's driven by different, pieces. Some people are like, just go, 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 go. And you're like, some people are just completely back, chair, back seat, relaxing, whatever. And you have the people in between. They're just like all over the place. So I think really adjusting those tweaks, correctly, and you'll help. And that's exactly, sometimes each one of those is good at one thing because that's what they do, and you help them balance the rest, and therefore now they can be literally adjusted, and any one of them can experience the same thing in the central level. And that's awesome. I mean, so then and I do want to go back to something you talked about, menopause and hormones and stuff, and how to, your advice to women specifically. But before we do that, well, let's do that actually, and then we'll go back to your Ayurveda, because I want to, like, if you can define a little bit, more on the concept and the teachings of it, and what does it entail. But so let's talk about just that the whole piece. I mean, I guess most of your clients are women, and you help them kind of adjust. And you're right. I mean, women, besides menopause, you have also the menses and stuff like that, and there's different, adjustment that need to happen, and it's not always easy. I mean, I have my wife, my daughter, and my mom. I mean, I've been surrounded with a lot of women in my work, my bosses. And so I know how that feels. And, coming from a male, like, oh, how much do you know? Why do you know? Because I'm surrounded, and you have to live with that and stand it and be, aware of these things, because there's times you can't be just like, well, what's wrong with you? I mean, that doesn't work. You need to know what's going on. And I would say for my fellow men, boys and men out there, just understand that you're going to have women in your life, and therefore you need to understand these concepts. And the more you know, the better your relationships are going to be, no matter who they are.
Totally.
So let's talk about that.
Yeah. So one of the things I like to do for, like, we'll start with the cycle health. So the menstrual cycle, like, it has 4 major phases. And so each of those phases, I slightly kind of tweak workouts for people and for myself. So the menstrual phase is the bleeding phase. And usually I tell people rest is best those first 2 days. And so I usually take those off, sometimes even day 3, just depending on how people feel. If anything, go for a light walk, do some yoga poses, but yoga restorative, not like a flow class. So that's kind of that first phase, because that's the time where people, and you'll get, female clients who are just like, I'm so tired, I'm exhausted. And so those are the days, again, where I pull out my yoga with clients. And then the follicular phase is going to be that you start to get a little bit more energy. Your hormones are rising again. And so for that, this is a great time to do creative workouts. So this is time where people like to do dance, or, try a new workout class, or try something different that you've always wanted to. This is a great time to do that. Now, there have been studies. This is also something that's kind of cool, I think, but people have not studied women's health and workouts like they do males. Like HIIT and all of those a lot of them are done in males, not in women. And so what they're finding is HIIT workouts all month long are not great for women. It really is not good for our hormones. And so that follicular phase, what they found is people are more likely to tear their ACLs and have those injuries, which, being a coach, I was a coach of basketball and for tennis many years. I'm like, this would have been great information just to know. So I could have helped. I had one girl, an 8th grade girl, tear her ACL, the weekend before our state tournament. I'm like, oh, if I would have known, like, I would have maybe not played her as much if that was her phase, and all these little things you can kind of do to prevent stuff like that from happening. So that's kind of one thing. Joints might feel a little bit more achy. So for those jumping things, maybe if you're training someone and they're in that phase, you're like, we're just not going to jump this, these 5 days. And then ovulation. So that's the time where you can do those HIIT workouts. So this is the time where your estrogen, progesterone are at their highest. And so you have that energy to give. And those HIIT workouts, those interval runs, all of that, this is time to do it. It's a short phase. It's not long. It's 3 to 5 days. So it's not a big chunk of our time. Then we slide into the luteal phase. Hormones start to drop. Estrogen does take a little peak up, and then it comes all the way down again, which most women, if you really are in tune with that, you'll feel. Like, I can tell, I'm like, oh, yep, I feel it. And then all of a sudden I'm like, nope, I don't want to lift as heavy, just because it doesn't feel as good. And so that's the time where people start to get maybe cranky, or the PMS, all of that stuff, which is normal, but it doesn't have to happen. And that's one way I like to introduce Ayurveda to people too. And, finding that balance with those doshas, so you can stop some of that kind of unfun things, with the menstrual cycle. And so the luteal phase is a great time to do strength training, stability work, core, pelvis stabilization. I like to work a lot on that, because once you're back into the menstrual cycle, when you're bleeding, the core, everything that's associated with that vata dosha, which again is where things get loosey goosey. And then you go back to the follicular, and if stuff is loosey goosey, that's the time you get injured. So it all is connected, but that's kind of the bird's eye view, I guess, I take from it. And that's why I think it's important, for, like, I'm also a pre-postpartum specialist. and I was trying to educate one of my male counterparts about it. I'm like, no, these things are really important because there are, rhyme and reason why we do these things. I worked with the Olympic athlete who was a cross country skier during her pregnancy. And so her stuff that she could do is way different from my other clients who are pregnant because she's an Olympic athlete. Like her core was amazing and she had that strength and that stability. But you don't train everyone like that, even though maybe they want to, just because you see that on Instagram, you're like, oh, I want to do that. Like, no, that's not necessarily great for you because you don't have that same background. And then as a trainer, making sure you have that restraint so you don't push them farther than they need to go at that time in their life. So that's kind of a little snapshot.
That's actually a big snapshot. As a matter of fact, I think this is the first time that someone, as a trainer or fitness or wellness person has broken it down literally to that level. And that's why I wanted to ask, because, a lot of women, out there may be, and they're fit. I mean, including my wife. I mean, she's in the fitness and, and she's a trainer as well and stuff, but understanding these, components and these cycles and how they impact your abilities, that's a big deal. And you just said something very important about the athlete, right? The Olympic athlete. That's someone that's been practicing and physically fit for a long time. You cannot compare that person to someone who just got into fitness literally, a few years. The core is different, the muscle, mass is different. So all these things, and the body is not used to certain things. So everybody's different. When a personal trainer is not understanding these things, they might sometimes put somebody at risk. So it's important to realize that, you need to know who, for what, and when you apply certain things. And even to your point, times of the month, that's even within the same cycle, there's different days for different things, and you have to be able to gauge those. And here's the other thing: if you're doing a class and you have a lot of people, and maybe some of them are experiencing it, now you have to tune in and up, which exercise you do and modify things for certain people. And that's the other thing, that's expertise. So I thank you for clarifying it, because I think people are listening right now like, wow, I didn't think about it. I'm listening for the first time, I'm hearing it broken down to that. I'm enjoying it. And I'm not even a lady here, so I'm getting the vibe about it. But here's the thing. The other thing I think that's big with women in general is also, I think, thyroids. Hormones. I mean, you mentioned hormones. I mean, thyroid, it's a big deal. And I know, because again, in the case of my wife, that's a big deal. And, some are hyper, thyroid, some are hypo, and that can change the whole dynamics. Is there anything in the Ayurveda, world that kind of helps regulate these things and through the teachings that you've learned?
Yeah. And this would be too tricky, I think, to give you like a set answer. I'll just kind of give you the general, but it's about the doshas. So when I look at people, like I'll just say heartburn, for example, because that's one that I tend to attract a lot of people who have heartburn. And so when I'm looking at heartburn, I'm looking at, okay, what dosha is coming out of balance? Typically it's your pitta, because again, it's the heating. It's going to be that acid. It's all the fire qualities, which are associated with that pitta dosha. So I'm looking at, okay, let's look at your lifestyle. Let's look at your nutrition. What can we do to fix it? It's going to be the same thing with the thyroid, only that's going to be a little bit more complicated, because we always say for whom and when. So like your medicine might be poison for me. And so that's kind of where I have like a 20-page intake when I really go deep. And so the thyroid would be one where I'd have to have you give me a 20-page intake to see exactly, I can see your lifestyle and get a glimpse. So that's kind of the one with some of these. With just the Ayurvedic, it's hard to give you like a quick boom, this is the answer, because for whom and when right now it might be great for you, but in 10 years, this might not be great for you because stuff has shifted, or now that's become, let's just say, like we use triphala. Do you know what triphala? Have you heard of that? Mm-hmm. So triphala is like it's an herb that we use if people are constipated. It's not something you want to be on long-term, but what I found in the Western world is people are telling people, yeah, you can take it all every day, for forever. And then my Ayurvedic doctor friends are like, no, that's not what we do in India. We take it 6 weeks. We are off of it 6 weeks. We see if we need to go back on it. And again, that helps with your daily eliminations. When people are constipated, that's typically when you go on it. And that's one that I've heard people kind of come to me and they're like, oh, should I take this? Or I'm taking this herb. I don't really know why. Or they saw it on, Pinterest. I had a gal who saw it on Pinterest, but she was trying to get pregnant. I was like, ooh, stop doing that immediately. That's a down and out thing. So we don't want to do that if you're trying to get pregnant, because it's a down and out. And so that's one thing with Ayurveda. If you see some herbs like ashwagandha, like that was one that was really popular. And I'm like, well, why are you going to take it? Are you taking it because this magazine article said it was really good? And that's not a great reason. Like you should still know, like, or get advice from an Ayurvedic practitioner or doctor before you take some of these herbs, because I mean, they're still medicine. Like this is what our medicine is made out of. It's made out of herbs. And so just kind of being a little bit aware. That's kind of my other soapbox. I guess I went on a tangent, but I think it's important because I have seen that. I've seen more people just taking random herbs just because they're like, yeah, I saw it in a magazine. I heard it's really good for reducing adrenal fatigue. And I'm like, oh, yes. And there's other better ways to do it, which include your lifestyle. Diet and lifestyle is where we start. We don't start with herbs. That's kind of the last thing we prescribe.
Well, thank you for clarifying that, because you're right. Now, it's the same thing like everything else. I mean, something that can work for me may not work for you. And, and just because it is good, but there's always good for who, as you said, it's not for everyone. You might be you, might be somebody, and there may be something better for you. And that's always key. So for our audiences and people in general, you always have to seek the advice correctly. I mean, it's like, Tylenol is good, but is it for everyone? I mean, if you have bad liver, you might not want to even venture. And that's a simple thing, right? I mean, I'm talking Tylenol as the acetaminophen, but the idea is just the concept.
Yeah. And that is actually, I just read an article that if you're pregnant, that should not be something that you take all of the time. They just had studies literally just done. I mean, it just came out this morning from one of the doctors I respect. And she was like, just PSA, this just came out. Be very careful if you are taking any Tylenol during pregnancy. This is not recommended. They don't know if this interferes a little bit with the fetus and the neurological development. So I'm like, all of that stuff where you're just like, you don't know all the time. And the person with ashwagandha with, just really quick with that heartburn, I told her, I was like, oh, like, I see you've been taking ashwagandha, what are you doing that for? And she said it was to reduce stress. And I was like, actually, it's a heating herb. So if you have all of this heat going on and you're taking ashwagandha, yes. And she didn't know, she was just like, I didn't know. And she had gotten recommendation from, I think some style of doctor, but I'm like, oh yeah, this is where the herbalist side comes out too. I'm like, you have to know if it's a heating or a cooling herb. So I was like, oh, I have a different herb that if you're going to take one, take this one. This is going to be probably contributing to your problem. So little things like that, just kind of before you just blindly, start taking stuff or following advice.
Well, so let's talk about that because really, I love the way you're breaking it down, because you understand these concepts through the Ayurveda, teachings. And so let's just deep dive. For some people, like, they're still probably like, so what's the overall picture of the Ayurveda? It sounds like there's holistic approach, there's herbal, techniques, there's some meditation techniques. It's a little bit of a whole approach. So let's talk about that whole concept, just to bring it as we broke down the masses, to a level where people can just like, oh, I think this is something that I'd like to venture in, or at least discover or experience. I mean, I think it may be for all of us that it's something that we can all benefit from.
Yeah. So when I teach this to people, a lot of times people are like, oh my gosh, I see the world in a different way now, because everything you can be looked at through an Ayurvedic lens, like every disease, every, workout, every practice, everything. So what I always look from it is like, let's just say, we'll look at food. So a salad is going to be dry. It's going to be cold. It's going to be cool. Let's look at a bowl of soup. That's going to be warm. It's going to be nourishing. It's going to be wet. And so when we're looking at these things, I can see two different doshas, and I know what's going to aggravate doshas. So when we looked at the salad, those qualities are similar to that vata dosha. So if you're prone to constipation, and if you're prone to vata being out of balance, which a lot of people are, that may be not the best thing for you to have. The soup is going to be similar more to that kapha dosha. It's going to be the grounding. And so that's going to be better for that vata dosha who tends to be up here. They want to ground themselves. So the soup is going to help ground them. But then on the flip side, if you're a kapha and you're feeling really out of balance and you're already really heavy and you just feel, oh, I don't have motivation, that soup is going to ground you more. So that salad might be a little bit better option because it's lighter. It's going to lift you up. And so that's kind of how I look at just the qualities and everything. I'm like, okay, if I'm going to work out and I'm feeling, again, that kapha, that heaviness, working out, that's going to help because it's breaking things up. It's moving. And then again, on the flip side, if we're a vata and we're moving and we're going to that fast vinyasa, yoga class where we're go, and we're already go, that's going to aggravate that vata. And now we're going to be spinning and out of balance again. And so, okay, well, I do want to move because movement is great. What can I do instead? Well, let me do a slow flow yoga class. Let me go for a walk out in nature. So it's something that I'm still moving, but it's going to keep me in balance. And then my pittas for workout wise, I will say I battle this one because pittas love competition. So CrossFit, very hard for a pitta to do successfully without injuring themselves, burning out, because you're just like, I gotta be number one. Same thing with like the Orange Theory classes. Like I used to teach there way back in the day, and like you had the pitta energy where you're like, I need to be the best. And so that's that pitta, which a lot of people in the wellness space tend to be, just because you probably come from a sports background of some sorts as well. And so balancing that, like I don't tell people never to do that. That's also why I had to probably attract a lot of pittas, because I'm like, no, you just have to know your limits. So if you're gonna do those things, you got to make sure you're okay not being number one. If you're, let's say, late luteal, like, and you're like, I have no energy, I'm down here. Like, we don't need to push to our max at that point. And so really tuning into the body, that's kind of, what Ayurveda is really at the core of things. It's all about listening to the body and slowing down to do it.
Well, so Ayurveda, you mentioned something about India. So it's deeply rooted in the Indian, the Eastern cultures, and specifically India. And I think it is again, yoga, same, I think similar teachings, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Sister science. Yeah, they call it the sister science to yoga.
And so for us here, we might not see them, in the same equal eye as the Western medicine, similar to the Chinese medicine, and it's the same concept almost. But it has to do, to your point, with the balance, the inner spirit. It's all about the energy. It's about the intake and the type of, I guess, plants you use for different things. And so there's all these treatments that you can, apply, and medicines, well, maybe just, elixirs, whatever you want to call them, and nice little potions, but they're actually, are good for different things. And that's really a big deal. I mean, because, and I know a lot of people, they sometimes don't get serviced in the right way in the regular Western medicine, because they get, adverse reaction with drugs that are, like pharmaceutical drugs, things like that. So they do kind of go to, holistic and, more plant-based and more like, unique approaches. And I think the Ayurveda concept comes in play there. It's the same thing again with Chinese herbs and things like that. So it's a big deal. But again, it takes someone like you that understands it to kind of present that in all aspects. You mentioned something clearly about, Orange Theory, and I know it's funny because they have the TV in front of them and they have to see like who's going to be top and stuff. So it causes that competition. But I personally can tell you this, I mean, I hit 50 and life changes every decade. And what I realized, originally it started with like, you want to win everything. Now I don't do it for winning. I do it for me. So I don't care if I don't do like 200 reps, that I, because someone's going to be like, oh, you didn't make the, no, I don't care. I'll do 10. I do 10 on my pace, and I'll do another 10 on my pace, and that's okay. Keeps, as long as I keep up with it. That's the thing. Like, you can go crazy, and then to your point, if you hurt yourself, it's over. And it gets to a point where you're going to hurt yourself because your body is not going to be the same strength that you've had before. And again, obviously the show is probably for everybody, and we have all different ages and that probably listen, but understand whatever age group you're in, just know your limits, know how far you can go. This is, we want to encourage people to be competitive and really athletic and stuff, but at the same time, make sure that the outcomes, because if you do it wrong, you might lose on, like you said, I mean, simple as the tennis player who actually got hurt the day before or a couple of days before a competition. And that's all there is. Sometimes you'll be like all excited, and then oops, something happens and you're done because you push yourself to the limit. So understanding this concept is simple, but it's pretty powerful in terms of practice. One thing you said, Andrea, which I enjoyed, you said that you get about 20 pages of content and assessment on each of your clients. So let's talk about that. I mean, what are you looking for specifically when someone comes to you as a coach or a trainer in this realm? Because you're right, and most of the assessments are typically 5 questions. Why you want to do this? What you do have a wedding, whatever. But really, to understand someone, you need to deep dive and ask some serious questions, because there's health stuff that you might not see. So what are some of the core things that you look for to make sure that you get the right plan for each client?
Yeah, so I do everything. I mean, like, you name it, I ask it, with like anything from sleep, diet, workout. What have you done in the past? Why did it not work in the past? We look at reproductive history. We look at family health history. We are looking at, what are your goals? And, I'm kind of looking through to see, do things match up? Because sometimes when you catch, you're like, okay, you say your goal is this, but, we're not quite in alignment with what's going on. I also look at spiritual, like, are you feeling fulfilled with, your spiritual practice, your hobbies? Are you doing stuff for fun? Family, all of that stuff. So I'm kind of doing the whole deep dive. And then really with that, it kind of just gives me all of that stuff again can be applied to the doshas. So I'm looking and I'm like labeling like a V, a P, or a K, based on their answers. Like I can kind of like, okay, that's a very vata thing, that's pitta. And then that's kind of how I tally up probably what dosha they are. And then once I get to talking with someone, typically I can pick out what dosha they are as well. And that's kind of where I put that together and put together their plan, because what they're, again, just because you're a pitta doesn't mean that like you fill out this form and you're like, yeah, but your vata, it's really out of balance. We gotta make sure this gets back in balance. And we always treat vata first. So vata is always if you have more than one going out. So let's say you have your vata and your kapha are off. We treat vata first because vata pushes the other doshas in and around the body. Because again, it's that wind. So again, if you had like a vata pitta and the wind is pushing that heartburn into here, we're going to treat that vata first. Even though you feel the heartburn, that might not be the root cause. Your root cause is over here. We got to settle that down. And then this will suddenly stop. So that's kind of the other things that we're looking for of where to start. And, depending on people's goals, and having a clear goal, I will tell you this really helps, because I've had many people who are just like, I want to learn everything about Ayurveda. And that's where I developed a course, because I'm like, okay, that's going to be more course. Like one-on-one Ayurvedic work is like really like, I want to get pregnant. Like, what are my best steps to that? Or I want to cure this heartburn, or, I have goiter. Like I had someone with goiter, like whatever these issues are, like it's got to be specific. Otherwise the general, you're better off doing like a course so you can learn about it and then implement it into your life. If you don't have anything specific that you're working to treat, that's just what I found in the last few years. That's why I said my personal training clients introducing those Ayurvedic habits have been, everyone loves it. All of my clients are like, yes, the more that I just sprinkle it in. I'm like, oh, you're feeling like this? Hey, incorporate this week. And they're like, great. And then they'll come back and report. And that's where I found the magic to really, and they've gotten better results because of it. Because you're not just doing your general, fitness and nutrition advice that people have heard before. Maybe it hasn't worked and they just kind of keep spinning their wheels. Whereas now I'm like, ooh, let's look at it from this angle. And they're like, yes, I like this. And then they start looking at everything from that Ayurvedic lens. And then that's when real change can start to happen.
Well, thank you, Andrew. First of all, I love your approach, because it is a full 360 everything. There's nothing. It's under the microscope in all the different angles, because some aspects can be missed, and therefore there may be something that the results will not be the same as I expected. And I love the idea that for personal training, you do more than just that. With your approach, because now you're treating also illnesses within. So you train the body inside and out. Because most of people think fitness is just the outside, and let's get some muscle, let's get some fitness going, let's get fit, lose some weight, maybe even diet. But really, heartburn is something that can happen for a lot of reasons. And if you don't treat it, that can be also impacted through your exercise or whatever. So as a simple example, you've referred to it a couple of times. But a lot of people may not know that, and I appreciate you breaking that down to our audiences, because now they can, I never put one-on-one together. Who goes to the gym thinks about their heartburn and how the gym's going to impact it? I don't think there's someone like, I'm going to my gym today and I'm going to do a yoga or Zumba, not yoga, but do a Zumba class. And I'm like, I got this, heartburn coming up. I'm not even sure why. Well, that's because no one is going to worry about it. It's not something that people are going to ask if you're a regular gym. So this is something important. And I like the way that you deep dive in olding family, history. Because things like that, you were going to say that. I'm sorry.
Well, no, I would say with that heartburn, as I've had a client before brought it up in a session, and I finally was like, I can help you with that. She's like, you can? And I was like, I know. Sometimes people even forget. They're like, oh yeah, you have that Ayurveda side. Yes, because that's been, for her, it was debilitating at one point. And so she was like, I'm not getting my workouts in because I am so bad in pain in the evenings and I can't do my workouts. And so I'm like, well, let's treat that. Like, let's get that figured out before we add on more workouts. So that's also one thing that I found useful of like, even just clients being like, oh, well, you can help with that. Like, sweet. Most personal trainers aren't going to be like, yeah, let me help you with your heartburn. So that's kind of the nice side effects of like just learning Ayurveda. And as a trainer, just always whatever you're passionate about, like really learning and going there and studying, because it will help clients.
Listen, I know. I mean, I'm just getting excited just listening about it because it makes a difference. Because you're right. Like, I mean, I've been training my life. Nobody's like, what's your body's doing inside. I mean, nobody cares. You do your thing. But you're right. When you have someone that you actually, they're tailoring something for you, they're really making it like customized to you. The more they know, the more they can help you. And that's really, if you miss a piece here or there, it's just not going to do you justice. So it's always good. And the right questions being asked will help better. And you have that to science. But now there's one thing I was going to ask. Now, I know we talked about plants and, treatments and things like for certain things. But what about like the diet in this concept, like the nutrition part? Is there any formula in that? Because I think that's just as important to, anything else when it comes to training and fitness and health or wellness in general.
Yeah, the Ayurvedic nutrition is vast. The system is, it can be very confusing. I will say that when people are first starting out. And so when people get in the weeds, I have found with Ayurvedic nutrition is when they are focused on, we'll go back to the dosha, let's say you're a kapha and you're like, I am just going to eat kapha foods, because there are foods, every food is going to be related to a dosha, as I said, with that soup and salad, kind of that thing. But when people get in the weeds with like, oh, I can only eat celery, or I can only eat kale, and I can't have tomatoes, then that's overwhelming. That's just a diet that people are trying to follow. And so that's where I'm really focused on the principles. And so when I try to tell people about the nutrition part, I try to keep it to the broad spectrum. So we don't get in the weeds with like, I can eat this food, I can't eat that food. I'm like, no, again, we're going back to those qualities. And so is this a heavy food? Is this a light food? Is this a spicy food? Probably not going to be good for the pitta, because you already have the heat in the body. And really, we have the 6 taste in Ayurveda as well. Which I won't go into too much depth because it's a whole nother topic, but like we have the 6 tastes that we're looking at with each of the doshas. And then kind of my general practices that I tell people to do is early, lighter dinners. And so having lunch be your biggest meal. And if you are a meat eater, meat better in the afternoon, like in that 10 to 2 window. And then the evening, that soup or those cooked salads, if you're prone to constipation, or salads in the summer, that's going to be kind of your evening. And then, your breakfast, you can just have your regular breakfast, oatmeal, whatever you're eating. But again, if you're oatmeal and your kapha, that's a heavy, denser food. So you're kind of, again, playing with, okay, is this going to be better? Fruit is best on its own, not to be eaten with a meal. That one I think is the toughest one for a lot of us and a lot of my clients, because they're like, oh, I throw fruit on my oatmeal, or I have fruit mixed into something. But it's really hard to digest. So it digests first, and then it can sour the stomach. And so then people have kind of that sour or that acid feeling. And so there's a whole nother side topic of that. And that's where people can get really into the weeds if they're like, okay, should have this, shouldn't have this, shouldn't pair here. So that's why I'm like, nope, let's just stick to early, later dinners. Lunch is your biggest meal. Start there. And then based on what's going on, I like to have like a good 7 days with people on their meal plan, so I can kind of see, I'm like, don't change anything. Let me see what you're eating. And then I can tweak from there. Ideally, snacking is minimal, if snacking at all in Ayurveda, because digestion is king. And if you're not digesting and you're constantly, they have a little different philosophy, I think, at least from when I was trained in the Western side with this. But if you think about your stomach and that flame, so you want that flame burning. So if you're constantly eating, all of a sudden you're kind of snuffing out that fire. So then you want that digestion going. And I found for myself, like that was how I lost weight after I had my son. I was like, oh, wow, I really stuck to the 3 meals, didn't snack, and I really improved my digestion. And so that was something that for myself really worked. And so if I have people who are like, oh, I want to lose weight, usually that's something that I have them approach if they can stick to that, the 3 meals, maybe 1 snack. If you do snack, fruit is best as a snack, as a standalone thing in the afternoon. Yeah. And there's so many other ones. I'm like, we could go even deeper, but we'll just stay there for now. So I'm trying not to confuse people with it, but there's so many principles with Ayurveda and nutrition. And, again, it really depends on what's going on. So I can give you a specific, like, here's what I would suggest for you.
Also, Andrew, thank you for that. I mean, this leads me to the next question, and we're almost coming to the end of the show. But the next question is like, your program is really a full package. I mean, this is not one thing. I mean, you really assess, you build a training, formula for each client. It includes, medicinal stuff. It includes, meditation and other aspects. It also includes, the right nutrition and the right balance and stuff. And what I like about it is that it's not eliminating things. I mean, it's not vegan, it's not vegetarian. It's a little bit of everything. So people don't have to cut up. And I'm sure it could work even if they didn't want to have any meat. It's still going to work. You're just going to substitute. But at the end of the day, it's not limited to a particular, flavor group, where they just don't, well, this is not for me. I love my meats, right? This is for everyone. And I think that's a big deal.
I think that is my personal philosophy too. So I have coffee is not recommended in Ayurveda. I still love coffee. I have my coffee a cup or two every morning. And I just know, okay, if I'm going to have it, I'm going to balance it because that's a vata, inducing thing. So I'm just going to make sure I'm doing something to stay grounded. So I always start my morning with grounding activities. So that's kind of how I look at it. I never like to take things away that people love. So if they're a coffee drinker, sorry, it's my dog's barking, but okay. If you're a coffee drinker, I'm not going to take that away from you unless, we're having a ton of like acid reflux and other side issues that, okay, this actually is part of the problem. But if it's not, if you're generally pretty imbalanced, you don't have any of those intense things going on that we need to take it out, we're going to keep it in there. And that's kind of my philosophy with anything or with any particular like problem food, so to speak.
I love it. It sounds like it's a lifestyle. This is not just, I
yeah.
mean, it's really a whole concept. It's a complete, package. And I think it's for everyone, not necessarily any particular, age group or gender. It's everyone can benefit from it. It's definitely can be also in adjusting, with medicine, or just natural, like, Western stuff. And so it's not like, this is, I'm going to go in this world and that's it, the end, everything I have to close. I think it keeps it open, but it gives somebody an ability to really be better and healthier. And it's just a different angle. So, so now someone wants to participate with you. How can they reach out to you? What is the best way to, to register with you and become a client?
Yeah. My website, AndreaClausen.com, and it has all of the different offerings that I have. I have some that work with the period. I have some that are just your Ayurvedic lifestyle school. And then I have your one-on-one coaching. But if you're interested in learning more about Ayurveda, my podcast, Peaceful Power Podcast, a great place to start to kind of get a little bit more in depth. I've talked about the 6 taste over there, and I've talked about vata. And so you can kind of get a little bit more background about different doshas and how Ayurveda can implement into your lifestyle.
Well, thank you, Andrea. And I'll have the link to all that on the description of the episode. So that would help. It's all right. He's part of the show too. So
yes, I know. That's my dog, Coco.
Hey, he wants to be part of it too. So he's like, yeah, I love this.
Pretty sure my package is being delivered right now is what's happening.
Oh, okay. No worries. But he's
doing
a
new pair of shoes.
He's doing a great job. Well, I don't know he or she, but
he.
All right. Well, listen, Andrea. So thank you, and keep up the great work. I mean, you certainly are helping a lot of lives out there, and this particular show, I think it's going to help a lot of people, at least guide them correctly and introduce them to the concept that you have. So that being said, is there anything you want to just leave the audiences with, today? Mm-hmm. Any advice?
My advice would be, now this would be like a tune-in practice, but every day for the next week, if you can like just write down how you're feeling, maybe energetically, spiritually, and physically every day on a scale of 1 to 10, and just kind of keep track and just notice. I'm a big fan of just being your own detective and just noticing how your energy fluctuates, how you feel. And then that gives you kind of nice data and feedback to work with.
I like that. I actually love that because I don't know if anyone is actually doing that and monitoring their own energy levels. And you're right. If we were to do this exercise, we'd probably be shocked. Like, wow, what's going on in our lives? But yeah, I appreciate that. That's a great tip. I think I'm gonna have to use it too.
Yes.
But yeah, that would work. I mean, I just imagine someone watching like, okay, let me start, 5, 6, 7, 3, 2. Oh, something is going, and then what will be the driver behind that? And then now you're like, okay, then something that's wrong and you can adjust correctly. Again, seeing is believing. You got to see it. And sometimes we don't see things. We just, wonder what the hell's going on. So
and noticing the patterns. Noticing
right.
the patterns.
I appreciate it. That was great. That was great. I mean, I haven't had that advice before. So that's good. So people take notes, please. All right. Well, listen, Andrea, thank you for a great time, a great show, a lot of insights here, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you so
Uh,
much.
you're welcome. Folks, thank you for watching the iHealth channel, the FitnessFab channel, as well, and listening on iHealth Radio with your host, Hurricane Age, with our guest today, Andrea. Bye for now.